Welcome back to Cutting It Close, a channel where we talk woodworking technology, a little bit of business, and make some cool projects. In today's video, I'm gonna go over the 7 biggest drawbacks and cons of upgrading to a commercial CNC. Now, to give you a little bit of history, I own 6 CNCs right now. I have 3 hobbyist type CNCs, 2 commercial CNCs, and an industrial CNC on its way arriving in a couple months, but more on that later. You know, I've done kind of every upgrade, and so I just want to give you a little insight, and this is kind of a requested video of, hey Ryan, what are the drawbacks after, you know, I'm starting to make a little bit of money with my CNC, or you know what, I want to get an industrial or commercial size CNC first. And so I just want to give you my perspective on what I think the drawbacks are of that I have noticed of owning one of these. Now, before I get into it, I want to give my classifications of the 3 tiers of CNCs. You have the hobbyist type CNCs, ones that have typically a smaller spindle, not as robust. They range from anywhere from $500 to around $20,000. You have the commercial line of CNCs, a little bit more robust, has a bigger horsepower spindle on it, can handle much larger bits, go a lot faster, and they range anywhere from $40,000 to about $100,000. And then you have industrial type CNCs, which are meant for giant production shops that range anywhere from $100,000 to $1 million, right? And these CNCs are meant for high production, established businesses. And that really, personally, I have only dreamed of getting, and the dream's been fulfilled, I have one on the way, but enough about that. Now, but before I move ahead, I do want to say that Shop Saber's not sponsoring this or anything like that, but I absolutely love my commercial series. It's a 5-foot by 10-foot CNC. It's made by Shop Saber, and I absolutely love it. I love it enough, I bought 2 of them. So it's awesome, it's a beast, but there is little things that, not necessarily this exact CNC, but every commercial CNC is gonna have. And so I'm gonna go over those 7 downfalls in this video. That starts with downfall number 7. Making small things start not to be as easy or fun. So, you know, with a hobbyist type CNC, you know, if you want to cut out a square or you want to cut out a little shape like this, you know, it takes you probably 10, 15 minutes to program it. You put it on a T-slot table, you hold a piece of wood down, maybe a piece of wood like this, and you cut out a shape. Super easy, right? No problem. 30 minutes, you're done. 15 minutes, you're done. With then commercial CNC, that stuff is not as fun because it takes so long to prepare. So with this, I have a T-slot table on this, and a lot of commercial CNCs do. But you don't want to cut all the way through it because you'll cut into your table. And this table on a bigger machine is really expensive. So you have to hold down your material a couple different ways. You have to make jigs like this one, or you do it using a vacuum table, just like this. Now, with a jig like this one, this is called inboard gasketing, and you have to have a piece a certain size. You turn your vacuum pump on, it holds this material down, and then you can cut. Or if you have the vacuum table or just the MDF, right, you put it on there, you suck it down, but it's just not as easy to get things fixtured. That's one of the problems. Problem number 2 is that it's a lot harder, all this initial setup you do with your smaller hobby CNC, you put a bit in there, you Z-height it, you set, go, it's good. With this one, it's just a lot more complicated, and you have to turn on, you have to get your air going to it, you have to get the dust collector on, you have to get a lot more things going. That drawback it's really interesting because you wouldn't think about it. You're getting a bigger CNC so you can make a lot more cooler stuff, and all of a sudden you realize that you can't make these little trinkets and gadgets and gizmos that you used to, or you can, but they're a lot more of a pain in the butt to do, and they take a lot more time to get ready. So by that time, you're already either angry enough or you don't have enough time to make them. So that's one of the first drawbacks that I've noticed. Now, let's go to drawback number 6. Programming is much more difficult. Now, I'm not talking about the machine itself and actually running the machine. I'm talking about whatever CAD or CAM file you're using, whether it's VCarve Pro or Rhino or whatever you're using to run this CNC becomes much more thought intensive, I would say. So for me, I have to worry about getting over the things that are holding down my materials, or I have to worry about the Z height of all my different bits, because now you have all these different bits to worry about. And if you have a commercial CNC, it's most likely gonna have an automatic tool changer. And you may even have a hobbyist type CNC that has an automatic tool changer. But now you have to worry about if you think the bit holder number 1, it has your compression bit in it, and maybe bit holder number 2 has your downcut bit. Well, let's say you accidentally get those mixed up when you're programming it. One's longer than the other, it comes back, it clips this, you break a bit, you ruin your project, or now you have 3 or 4 different tool paths you're trying to run on one project. And so I have found in my personal experience that if I program something for my smaller CNCs, that I can do it really quickly. And this one I have to double check because I'm always worried about maybe not getting the correct bit in there, or just not doing something right. So to me, programming is a lot more thought intensive whenever I'm doing this. Now let's go to drawback number 5, training. Now, training on many different fronts. So training on how to use the machine, what bits to use, how to run the programs that I want to run and stuff like that. Now, if you have a commercial type, you may be running it yourself, but eventually you're gonna have to teach somebody else to do it because you will get sick eventually, or you will not be home and need somebody to run the machine. And so I'll show you a little bit of this computer interface right here on how ShopSaver sets it up, and just know that this computer interface just to run the machine is about the simplest I've ever seen. Typically on commercial machines, they're pretty difficult. You have a lot of you have a weird looking keyboard. It's more of a milling type of machine. So there's a lot of different things going on right here that take a little bit of training. So just to train on getting the machine going and what buttons to push, takes about a month to actually be able to trust the person that's doing this. Now, to run the machine and to actually know what's happening is a lot different. Now, on your hobbyist type CNCs, you tell, hey, you get your buddy and say, hey, every time it stops, just press go, run another cycle. Well, here, change it out, there you go, press go. And if a bit breaks, just let me know, right? Nothing crazy. Well, on this one, there's so many different variables at play that if a bit breaks, well, it's still gonna continue going. Like, this machine's so much more powerful. So if you leave a broom sitting up here and it hits the broom, well, if you don't train somebody right, your mistakes are a lot more costly than at a hobbyist CNC. And that's kind of what I'm alluding to on this training, is that, I train about 6 months on this until I actually trust somebody to actually use it during the day without no supervision. And so it takes a lot more training on a commercial CNC than on a hobbyist type CNC. And first of all, it's a giant learning curve in the first place. So you're gonna take a lot of training to know how to use it. And then whoever you're training to use it, it's gonna take an additional training. So just keep that in mind whenever you're upgrading to a commercial, that there's a lot of things to consider when just teaching somebody how to run it. That takes me to point number 4. Bits get much more expensive. Now, you can ask me, Ryan, they shouldn't get more expensive. I can still use a 1/4 inch bit on this. And that is very true. You can still use a $20 bit, $30 bit, $50 bit on these machines, which is perfectly fine. But the reason you most likely got the commercial machine is that you want to go faster and be more productive. Therefore, you're probably going to get, hold on, wait. Perfect. Therefore, you're probably going to need a little bit bigger bits to do that, such as this 1/2 inch finisher right here. So that's why I kind of mean, bits are going to get more expensive, where they're going to go from a $20 bit all the way up to $500 bits. And so if you want to come over here and kind of take a look at some of the bits that I have that I upgraded to. So whenever you're first starting out, you're using a lot of 1/4 inch or 6mm bits like this, right? And there's a compression bit, and then you can, on your hobby CNC, you can use a 9mm or a 3/8 inch bit on some stuff. But whenever you can technically use 1/2 inch bits as well, or 12mm. But the issue becomes these right here. This one's $130 right here. This 1/2 inch rougher, 12mm rougher. This bit right here, which does some profiling, is a 18mm 3/4 inch bit that cost about 350 bucks. So if you break this one, it costs $350 versus if you break something like this, it costs you $20. So there's a big difference in these, whereas this one can run about 4 times as fast as this one. So keep that in mind. Now, the great thing about bits like this is you can resharpen them and reuse them. Whereas, you know, this bit, you know, on average, you know, you always just, on average, it takes about $20 to resharpen bits. Let's just say that on average. It's not 100% all the time true, but let's say $20. So at a $130 bit, when you resharpen it for 20 bucks, now you have a 0.48 inch bit, and that you can reuse. Now you have to reprogram it to be able to reuse it, but you can still reuse it. This bit's $20. You resharpen it, it costs about 20 bucks to resharpen. You don't deal with it, you just buy a new bit. So there is some benefits of having more expensive bits that you can resharpen, but that was something I did overlook whenever I was getting into this as well, is that bits became much more expensive and much more complicated. So keep that in mind if you are upgrading your CNC. You use the more expensive bits to produce your product. That brings me to point number 3, space. Now this one's kind of a no-brainer. Obviously you're gonna have a much larger CNC. It's gonna take a much larger footprint. But the space I'm talking about is something that, you know, I didn't really plan on. So one, you're gonna have space in the back for your vacuum pump or some elsewhere in your shop for your vacuum pump. You're gonna have a lot more overhead space in order to run your dust collection. You're gonna have to have space to walk all the way around your machine and access all the spots, because now you're loading up the bits from the back of the machine. You're gonna have at least, I would say, half of the CNC's length in front of the machine, so you can unload it this way. And the biggest thing is that if you're running a lot of parts on it, let's say you're cutting out plywood or a 4x8 sheet or a 5x10 sheet and taking up this whole entire thing, that you're gonna have to wanna unload it this direction as well. So the total footprint you're gonna need is typically, from right here, it's 2 to 3 times bigger than the size of your CNC. I didn't plan on that. Now you're asking, hey Ryan, you have this other one put back here. It doesn't have that much space, right? It's not like this one, you have it tucked away. I can only use the front of that machine to unload and offload parts. So only the front little section, just like this, gets used of that machine, because I cannot unload it from the side like I can this one. So that one can only be used for certain things, versus I have the space on this one to be able to unload it and offload it wherever I want to. So space is a big thing. Once again, you would assume it's bigger, it's gonna take up more space, but it's gonna take up 2 to 3 times the footprint that you're actually thinking it's gonna take up. So keep that in mind. Whereas the hobbyist one, you tuck it away in the closet, you do whatever you really want to with it. It doesn't take up too much space. Now let's get to point number 2. Numerous unforeseen costs. Now what do I mean by unforeseen costs? Of course I mean overhead. So overhead's gonna be a big one, where the insurance on this thing, the footprint, the taxes, the amount of dust collection it's gonna use, the dust hose, there's a lot of little things that start adding up. These tool holders aren't cheap, and believe it or not, you don't use the same tool holder for every kind of bit. If you have a very short bit, you have to grab a tool holder like this. This thing is not cheap. Well, now you have 3 of those bits, so now you're buying a lot like this. Or back to point number 4 about the expensive bits. I spent over $50,000 last year on just bits because of what I'm cutting and how I'm cutting it and stuff like that. That's an unforeseen cost. I never in my life thought I was gonna spend that much on just CNC bits. And you're like, Ryan, well, you're breaking them. No. I am using them as efficiently as possible. I did a lot of math, I'm using them as efficiently as possible. But I use that many CNC bits because I have 2 CNCs running 12 hours a day, 5 to 7 days a week. So I use a lot of bits up. That's another unforeseen cost. Downtime, having a guy run the CNC, and then him, and just general, I guess, employee practices of him needing to tie his shoe and take a break and stuff like that, that's an unforeseen cost. Having to deal with all this sawdust you're making is an unforeseen cost. I can fill an 18-wheeler every week of sawdust. What do you do with that? Now, is it costing me a lot of money? But no, it's cost me a lot of time dealing with that. So there's so many tiny unforeseen costs, grease, repairs. Once again, insurance is not cheap on these things. So there's a lot that I didn't consider when going to this. The cost of just taking up space, rent if you're renting a place. And this thing's gonna take up a lot more space than 3 hobbyist type CNC would, or smaller CNCs. So it's just something to consider when. Perfect. It's just something to consider, once again, whenever you're looking at a commercial type CNC, is that You know, I wish I just had the simple cost of my smaller CNCs, and life would be so much easier. It seems like every other week I'm writing a check or you know, paying something for this CNC that I never thought I'd have to pay. Now let's get to the most important point that I want to address, and it's an intangible one. It is the nature of the beast. Let's go. All right, so we arrived at my final point, and this point is actually, I had to compose myself before this because it gets me a little emotional talking about this, because this point is more of a, it's intangible, it's more of a mindset shift. And I'm not trying to get all weird on you or anything like that, but the biggest thing that I noticed that I had to do whenever I went from a smaller CNC to a big one is understand that I'm playing with the big boys now. And this cost a lot of money, and I had to feed the beast some way. And so your mindset has to turn very entrepreneurial, and you can't just think, oh, I always gotta have fun on this. Now there is time for fun, but this thing is sitting, it's idle, it's not making you any money, right? It's not paying for itself. It's not paying for your beautiful, amazing shop with all your cool, manly toys, right? And so you have to feed this thing, and the biggest, I mean, I can't emphasize this enough. If you absolutely just love CNC machining and tinkering with little tiny things, there's a big mindset shift from doing this. See, in my head, I was born to start a wood company. I was born to grow this thing, and I was literally just born to, I don't know, be a woodworker, be a wood entrepreneur. So this is right up my alley, but a lot of people can't handle that this costs a lot of money. It'll keep you up at night if it sits idle for a week or sits idle for a month. You know, you may have to, you know, just the psychological warfare that's going on in your head whenever you have a couple of these sitting. So if I have a couple of these sitting for a couple of days, I get all anxious, right? And that's hard for some people to deal with. So, you know, there's a lot of days where I just want to go back to the good old days where I had my Hobbyist CNC and I can tinker with it, I can play with it. It can sit a couple months and no harm, no foul. Wipe the rust off of it if it gets rusty, and it's good to go. If that happens to these, I'm freaking out, because now I have to feed employees, to feed my family, and these machines are producing product that are going to keep the company running. So it affects a lot more things than you think whenever you get something like this. So if you're just starting out and say you don't even own a CNC right now and thinking about buying a commercial one first, you can do it, but just make sure you're able to feed this beast, because just remember, you're not going to be in Kansas anymore. You're playing with the big boys. That's my #1 point, and I cannot stress this enough. It's a giant mindset change. It's intangible. I don't know you. I don't know if that's your mindset or not, but if it's not and you know it, don't make the jump. That's it. That's my 7 drawbacks of owning a commercial CNC. I hope y'all guys one day get to have 1, 2, 5, 6 of these things. I hope you build whatever you want to make in life. I hope you continue the woodworking journey like I have, and I got a long road ahead of me. I was born to do this. I know you were born to do it too, and I hope this video gave you a lot of value. And once again, I hope you leave this video with more knowledge than when you started this video. That's my main point of this YouTube channel. So thanks for watching, and remember guys, if you ain't cutting it close, you ain't cutting it right.